guys, gals, and non-binary pals, welcome to the WINterview, part of Board Game, the game show, the WINterview, the only interview you can win. Yes, you out there and also back there, all of you can possibly win this. Tonight's top prize is $10. It is 1/6 of your way, I believe, to owning Super Mario 3D All-Stars, or it is an entire deck of very nice playing cards. Joining me on the show tonight is Andrew Wolf. Andrew, how are you doing tonight?
I am doing well. How are you doing, Bruce?
You know, not bad. Now, we talked about this right before the show started. I'm running like that much late, so things are a little less bolted to the ship than normal, but good. Very good. Yeah, at any moment, it might just be that we're going to have to start swaying side to side. As a note, if you're out there, if you have any questions for Andrew as we go along, don't hesitate to put them in the comments. We will be taking them as we go along. So, for just a quick second, let's give everybody your CV, because I know the games that I most know you for are the Rising games.
Mm-hmm.
So, like, what else is happening? What else are you working on? I know there was a lot of stuff over at USAopoly that was yours. But there's so much stuff that I like. Kind of let us know, when we think of Andrew Wolf, what is it that you would most like to have people look at and think about?
Well, you mentioned the line of Rising games, which I designed the sort of original mechanics for, and then applied for Thanos Rising, for the Marvel Cinematic Universe, and then Death Eaters Rising for Harry Potter, and the Star Wars version. I guess you can kind of see them all over my shoulder here. Darkside Rising for Star Wars. And then I left USAopoly to pursue some other opportunities a couple of years ago. I spent a little bit of time at Mondo, and then a little bit of time at Funko, before ending up at Pokemon, where I've been for the last 4 months now. But they continued to support I guess it's a brand now.
Yeah.
There's a Batman version coming out and a SpongeBob version. So it's really fun to see, like, my designs continue on without me. And like, but part of me is like, oh, that looks really fun. I wish I could work on that. But part of me is also like, I've sort of left a legacy. I've designed something that other people have kind of picked up and then put their twist on. So it's really fun. And I feel like really just privileged and honored to have created something that people seem to really like and resonate with and want more of. As sort of as a fun aside, I was just like we all do, kind of scrolling through my Facebook feed a couple minutes before jumping on, and there was a post in the Board Game Geek Facebook group where someone had like put a couple pictures of Thanos Rising out, and they had lost their first game. They're like, and they, I don't remember exactly what they put it, but like, oh, Thanos kicked our butt. I really have to read about my strategy, but I really enjoyed the game. So nice. Like, whenever somebody posts about it, I will just kind of chime in and say like, oh, I'm glad you're enjoying it. Thanks for playing. It's really, I don't know. It's kind of an indescribable feeling for me to see something that I worked so hard on, and a lot of other people did too. Like, I can't claim that, like, anyone who thinks that like game design is a sort of siloed solo activity, I think doesn't take into account all the other things that are involved with art and layout and copy and production and manufacturing and sales and marketing. It's like it takes a team to really put a game out there. So I definitely have to tip my hat to everyone at USAopoly who helped bring these games to life. But it's the feeling I get when I see somebody out there who I've never met, posting that they are excited, they enjoy, they had a good experience with something that I helped create. It was really a remarkable experience. I feel like it's kind of indescribable. It just, I don't know, it gives you the warm fuzzies. You're like, I did a thing, and someone else out there enjoyed it, and I made their life better for some amount of time. So, you probably have had the same experience, I assume.
Oh, definitely. Some of the stuff I got to work on at North Star while I was there is some of the proudest stuff that I've worked on, that I got to touch kind of I feel like Wits and Wagers is one of the, like, in my opinion, big trivia games.
Mm-hmm.
And as a trivia nerd, to know that there's a little bit of part of that side touch on it, because it's exactly what you're talking about. The designer has a part of it, but then there's layout people and kind of mood people. And, it's shocking. That's one of the things that I often talk about being like in the industry, which I hate that quote, but it's the truth, is that suddenly especially when you go from just being like a fan nerd to getting in and working in it, you do start to realize that there are so many different aspects that make a game successful and get a game to market.
Mm-hmm.
That it's just really surprising. Like for the newest Wits and Wagers, I helped with the newest Vegas theming. I didn't design the game. I've written I think 2 questions that are in the version, but as far as the look of it, I had a lot of the mood work on it. So it's just so strange to realize how many people it takes. Exactly what you're talking about to make a board game is really surprising.
Yeah, and then to see it out there in the wild, in the public, and people
Yep.
enjoying it, and knowing that that's I think what's always been the biggest takeaway for me, and why I feel so honored, so privileged, so lucky to have had a career working in the industry in
Yep.
making games, is that we're making entertainment, we're enriching people's lives, and that's a pretty special thing that we get to do. So yeah, it's nice, it's fun. So outside of that, what I like for people to know me for, it's I touched so many things throughout my career. I worked on the World of Warcraft trading card game when I
Nice.
was at Upper Deck and Cryptozoic, and it's fun. Every now and again, I'll see people talk about that. It's oh man, that game was so great. And I was it was a really great game for a number of years.
Mm-hmm.
Um, at US Monopoly, I had a hand in developing so many titles, from all their monopolies and Yahtzees and Risks and Clues and Trivial Pursuits and all that stuff. That it's a pretty big resume of work, but it's all kind of happens a lot behind the scenes.
Yep.
So it for me, it's I'm not doing this to get famous, or honestly to get rich. I think anybody I've talked to who says that you get into board gaming to get rich needs to kind of rethink their priorities. I think we all do it because we love it, and we
Oh,
love to just enrich people's lives.
oh, definitely. I know the old saying many, many years ago was, if you want to make a small fortune in board games, just start with a large fortune and you'll get there in no time.
Yeah,
Uh, I think things are
exactly.
getting a little better now. The market's opened up a little bit more, but 10 years ago, that was absolutely the truth. No matter where
Well,
you were, no matter what level you were at, that was pretty much outside of your Hasbros. And I
mhm,
always felt like for them, they were probably making far more money off the toys. It's just the games kind of had to continue to run because it's social currency. Things like
mhm.
Monopoly and Yahtzee, and they need to be out there because they've always been out there. But I felt like for them that clearly the money was coming from somewhere else, and the games were just kind of to keep their brand alive in different spaces. One
Absolutely.
quick thing I want to do for everybody, I just want to bring this up real fast. The second half of the show, Andrew answered a whole bunch of questions. We're going to talk about those. If you want in and shout out our $10 prize, $10 prize, go to crowd.live, enter the code 8R6SD. 8R6SD is how you get in the game. We'll bring it up some more, don't worry. But I like at some point in the beginning of the game for folks that are ready and chomping at the bit to win. Once again, $10. I would say a really nice deck of cards for $10. 8R6SD, a really nice deck of cards, or a probably pretty miserable Nintendo Switch game. Just guessing. Maybe I'm wrong. Maybe you'll find 4 great Nintendo Switch games for that price. Once again, I'll say it one more time, and we will bring it up again. 8R6SD gets you in the game right now. There are 2 players, so you have a 50-50 shot at getting the money, but people join in as we go through the show. So let's pull back out. So a quick question for you, just because you have touched some of those big Hasbro games. How
Mhm.
does it feel to get to kind of get under the hood and meddle with some real long running classics?
It's a really interesting experience because, especially with Monopoly, Hasbro is very protective of the brand.
I
Like
bet.
that, the Monopoly brand is their flagship game brand by
Hmm.
far, and a lot of people like to kind of. It's I think especially in the industry
Hmm.
or who have kind of explored the hobby a little bit more, like to kind of look down their nose at it, but it's it's ubiquitous.
Yep.
Everyone's played it. Everyone knows it.
Yep.
Sure, maybe there are some quote unquote better games out there, but you're going to be hard pressed to find a game that you can sit down at a table with almost anyone and they're going to know how to play.
Oh,
And
definitely.
the way I always treated Monopoly, because Hasbro was pretty restrictive about what you're allowed to do with it.
Okay.
In terms of like changing up the rules and stuff, they
Yeah.
want, because they want a common experience. They don't
Yeah.
really want you to start changing up the rules too much. Well, they've explored it a little bit recently with like Monopoly Gamer and a couple of those editions.
Yeah.
I always viewed it as more of like a platform upon which to apply a theme. So with all
Okay.
these different license versions, they're like,
Yeah.
okay, well, I know what a Monopoly game is. It's 22 properties and 4 railroads and 2 utilities and
Yep.
chance community chest and go to jail and houses and hotels. It's like you have all of these kind of foundations, and then there's a really fun creative exercise around, okay, well, if I'm going to make a Game of Thrones version of Monopoly, what does that mean? And like, how do you translate everything
Yeah.
and like be true to the gameplay, but also be true to the license that you're applying? So
Definitely.
it was always I enjoyed it. I mean, I helped make a whole bunch of Monopoly games, and it was always fun to sit down and go like, all right, well, what the properties be? Should they be characters? Should they be locations? Should they be concepts for whatever the license is? What's the currency? What are we going to consider the houses and hotels as?
Yeah.
What kind of fun copy are we going to put on the chance and community chest? It was a lot of fun, even with sort of the confines. And one of the things that I've always said about design, at least from me, is that restriction breeds creativity.
Yep.
If you give me like a blank piece of paper and a box of crayons and say draw something, I'm gonna kind of go, okay. But if you say, draw a cityscape, it's like, all right, well, I can still interpret that in a lot of ways, but at least it gives me some idea of like, well, what am I doing here? And you could tell 10 people to do that, and they're going to do something completely different.
Yep.
But it also creates some interesting restrictions that I think help kind of foster some creativity and give you some guardrails. So that's what I've always appreciated about working with existing brands, whether they be
Hmm.
game brands like Monopoly or Munchkin or Code Names or a
Yep.
number of other brands that I've worked on, or they be IP like Marvel or Star Wars or Harry Potter. It's like,
Hmm.
okay, well, I have some context here. Now, how do I bring that to life on the tabletop? And it's always a lot of fun. It's always a fun creative exercise. And fortunately for me, I grew up with a lot of these brands. I just have always been a geek and a nerd and fan of pop
Yep.
culture and stuff like that. So the work that I've done over the course of like the last decade plus really has played into my experiences growing up, and it was interesting. I was talking to a friend a couple of days ago about, interesting enough, about Pokemon,
Okay.
because that's where I'm at now.
Yeah.
And we're talking about how people remember all the different Pokemon, the numbers, the evolutions,
Hmm.
all the different characters. And I paused for a second. And I said, imagine if we all like took that knowledge base and applied it to something quote unquote like relevant or applicable, like math or history or something like
Yep.
that. Like, would we be better off for it? But my friend then kind of reflected me. It's like, we have to think about your career and how you've been able to progress in it, and it really came from that knowledge that you cultivated by being a fan of all these things growing up as a kid. So, you know, it's like, I don't think I would be anywhere near as good at my job if I didn't grow up, you know, loving Star Wars and playing with the action figures and Transformers and G.I. Joe,
Yep.
and just immersing myself in all of those worlds. So that now, as an adult, when I'm asked to, you know, recreate those experiences on the tabletop, I can look back to my childhood and say, what kind of experience would I have wanted to have? You know, what like sparked joy in me, and what do I remember about it that I can then apply here? So, you know, I guess it's not wasted knowledge. So, you know, so whenever a kid, you know, gets yelled at for like, oh, you should be, you know, studying harder in school and doing better at this, it's like, maybe pause for a second and really think about that, because they might have an interest outside of what is, you know, typically acceptable, but
Mm-hmm.
you don't know where that's going to take them one day. So I don't know. It was an interesting reflection I had earlier this week.
I think that's part of why like geek has gotten so popular, because I think you and I are not that dissimilar in age, that you remember a point where like video games were kind of popular among like kids your age, but adults didn't want to hear about it. They thought it was a wasted youth. And if
Oh,
you
right.
were really into a lot of nerd stuff, like even board games and stuff, you were sort of a shunned outcast. You know, if you were a D&D kid, no one
Oh,
really
yeah.
wanted to associate with you other than the other 4 D&D kids who loved you. But like now
Oh,
that
you
stuff's
are,
hot.
yeah, you're speaking my language. And I
Yeah.
think I had one, I started playing D&D with the red box.
Yep.
Um, and it was probably, I think I was in fourth grade. And I had like one friend in elementary school who I played with, and no, you know, no one else was interested in that. People want, like, justifiably so. People wanted to play outside and ride bikes and, you know,
Yep.
play sports and stuff. And I was like, well, I wasn't particularly coordinated, so I was always picked last for kickball, and you know. But I was like, all right, but I like this stuff and I can get into it, and you know, you
Yep.
find your clan, you find your group. So yeah, it started with Dungeons and Dragons in elementary school, and when I got into high school and college, it really developed into Magic the Gathering.
Okay.
Um, we did a lot of the same thing happened in college. I went to school at the University of Miami.
Okay.
Just like a lot of it is known for its athletics.
Mm-hmm.
My freshman year there was the year the football team won the national championship. You know, so a lot of people, you know, followed the athletics around the school. There wasn't a
Yeah.
very big geek culture, you know, in a campus of 20,000 people, but we found each other. And I remember we actually created a board game club, and you could get
Nice.
sponsorship from the university for your club. So it was like, we can get the university to give us money that we can then go spend on board games. Nice. So we created a board game club. We actually hosted a convention on campus
Nice.
for like a weekend. I think it was in my
Okay.
sophomore year. One of my friends in the group was sort of our dungeon master, and he wrote like a little, you know, scenario and ran people. We had people sign up, and like we all dungeon mastered it and ran people, like much like happens all the time now.
Yep.
But this was in like 1993. So I feel
Okay.
like that didn't really happen that much back then. And I go to Gen Con now, and you see, you know, rows upon rows and rooms upon rooms of people role playing and running through these scenarios and campaigns and stuff. And I was like, we did that in like the early 90s. We were really kind of ahead of the curve there.
Well, and it's been surprising, probably even in your time since you were working at USAopoly, like rebranding monopolies till now, how much, you know, like when I talk to folks, they're like, oh yeah, I got into gaming in 2017. And I'm like,
Mm-hmm.
oh, you don't even understand the uphill battle just since like 2000 of what everything has become and how far things have progressed, and definitely how far IP games have progressed. Because it used to be if you saw an IP on a game, you just knew it was not good. You could just assume that. The
Yeah.
best you would hope for is that it was like a slapped on brand onto a game that you knew was half decent. So you ended up with like Yahtzee, but the dice looked like Mario bricks or something if you were lucky. Because you were like, well, Yahtzee's not a fine game, and I love Mario, so it'll be okay. But
I
in the
mean,
time, yeah,
definitely
exactly.
helped make that.
Yeah. But I mean, even before then, like every once in a while you would see something come out where it would be, like I said, like a movie crossover. But if you saw like a board game about like the old Legend of Zelda board game from the 90s was
hmm
trash. It
Oh,
was it was
yeah.
objectively a bad game.
I remember a couple of years ago for Star Wars Day, for May the 4th, at
Yeah.
work, we wanted to do something fun and like Star Wars theme, but we didn't want to do anything too serious. So like, let's play
Yeah.
a Star Wars game. And someone had the old Escape the Death Star game from
Yep.
Kenner. That
Yep.
game is not good, but
No.
but yet it was still fun from a very like throwback nostalgic perspective. It's like this is what games were like in the 70s. Wow, they were not good. And the art was like it was all this line art that was like it
Yep.
kind of looked like the characters and it was honestly a fun experience even though it was not a good experience by modern gaming standards. But like that's what we accepted back in the day, absolutely. Uh,
Well, plus fun is the most important part. Like that's the thing I think a lot of like I'm going to generalize like your board game geek gamer, especially if you're hardened and you've been in this for a while, is you forget the most important thing is fun. If
mm-hmm.
what fun is to you is Dream Date, that's awesome. Have fun.
Yeah.
Pick up that pink phone, call boys, figure it out. Like that's awesome. There's nothing wrong with that at all if that's the game. Or if fun for you is Democker, and it's got to be a solid 3 hours of working your way through the German legislative system. There's nothing wrong with that either.
Yeah, but fun is contextual and it's relevant,
Yep.
Relative to your group and what you're looking for. And and this is going to start getting a little, I don't know, philosophical, I think. But I was talking to a friend Tuesday about he was asking me like, how's it going in Pokemon? Because you've only been there a couple months, and I was like, it's really been interesting. Because it's like it's such a huge game and such a huge brand, but the way people engage in the game is very interesting. And I say engage because honestly, a lot of people who play the game, collect the cards, don't necessarily play by the official rules, but that doesn't mean that they're not like playing.
Of course.
They are using their imagination. They're doing something, whether they're comparing numbers or just picking their favorite art or something. Like they're having an engaging play experience with something that has been provided to them. And so somebody can be like, well, that's not how you're supposed to play. And it's like, but are they having fun? Who cares if they're, playing by the rules? Another great example is somebody, I'm going to tangent for a second. You asked me one of the things that I think, I want, I don't know, to be known for. And one of the things that I'm really proud of is kind of something you touched on where you said like, before licensed games generally were kind of looked down on or not good.
You could safely assume that.
Right. I take a lot of pride personally in, I think, moving the conversation forward. Mm-hmm. And, now you see a lot of licensed games come out that I think are much better regarded. And I think that really, honestly, it wasn't just me. And there were good licensed games that came along before I started working at USAopoly and we started developing those games. But I hear a lot of people I talk to, at least in the industry, say that Harry Potter Hogwarts Battle really kind of was a pivot point, and it showed that you could take a huge IP and make a little bit more robust, hobby style game and make it like really good in terms of like resonating theme and narrative and story and characters and stuff like that. And that's one of the things that I think I take the most pride in is sort of like a new, it's like a new age revolution for quality licensed games. But now you see a licensed game, and I think your assumption is it's probably going to be pretty good, especially if you see a certain publisher attached to it. Like I think USDOplay has done a really great job putting out good licensed signature games like Hogwarts Battle and the Rising games and some of the co-branded games as well. Like I took a lot of pride in what we did when I worked with Fireside for Star Trek Panic.
Yep.
Stuff like that. And the time I spent at Funko and the development work that Prospero Hall has done for licensed games. Like, there's so many of them now. Pan Am is really great. The Godzilla game
is such a good game, and it's one of the things I've talked about many times is and even at the beginning of the conversation, if you saw a license on a game in 97, you were dubious at best. Now it's just, hey, someone has designed a root building game and now licenses are available and there's enough money in making these games that you can attach even kind of like a half-dead brand like Pan Am, because I feel like that's a brand that like it can sell a couple of watches, it can sell a pen, it might be able to sell like a pair of slippers, but the idea of it being on a board game seems so strange, and then you see it and you're like, because this says Pan Am, I like it more than I would have if it was called Airplane.
Right. Absolutely. Well, nostalgia is really, really powerful.
Oh yeah.
As we know. So, and people have nostalgia for brands, so that like it just is built-in marketing. But it also helps that the games are very good. And I definitely have to tip my hat to the designer of Pan Am, who also is a designer of Horrified.
Nice.
And one of the designers of Lords of Waterdeep. I think his name is Peter Lee, and I don't think enough people know who he is. He used to work at Wizards of the Coast on things like Lords of Waterdeep. He also did Tyrants of the Underdark, which I think is a really underappreciated deck building game. He worked on Horrified. He worked on Pan Am. He's just a really, really, really thoughtful and talented game designer. And like those are 4 great games that I think arguably anyone would agree are just very top tier. So it's like people are taking licenses seriously and really, I think approaching them in a way that people are starting to appreciate. And I take a lot of pride in kind of helping move that conversation along by showing what was doable with Hogwarts Battle.
Very cool. I'm going to, real quick, once again, I'm going to bring the game up. Once again, just a couple of minutes. We're going to start into the quiz part of the show where you can win $10, as was noted earlier. Could be half dozen donuts. And in the right place, could be a dozen donuts. A couple comments coming in here. We'll take care of that. Fun despite the game instead of because of the game. So that is I think that might be a thing that's different than talking about that Star Wars game and some of the games that I've played. There are just objectively not good games that your friends are fine with. And there are some games where they had to be there. They may not have been like amazingly designed games, but if it wasn't a Star Wars game, it wouldn't have given us the rest of the stuff to talk about. Exactly. So it's not really despite the game. The game had to bring its presence. It just, with the lens of time, we can say, well, you probably could have done almost everything better.
Right, but like in the example of that Star Wars game, if it had just been a generic themed game, it would have been 10 times worse. But the fact that I'm still running around as Han and Luke and Leia, it's like, I don't know, it just made it more fun to immerse yourself in that, even if what we're doing is not really good.
Completely understandable. I'm going to mention everybody again. Once again, I'm going to crowd out live. Put in the code 8R6SD. 8R6SD gets you in the game. $10 is your top prize tonight. And we'll chat for a couple more minutes, and then we'll jump into that. So one thing we talked about before the show started, you touched on it a little bit, but I wouldn't mind talking about it a little bit more, is like early Geek U. And now all of the properties you've had a chance to touch and all the things you've had a chance to make something in. One, I'd like to know how that feels. And then I have kind of a follow-up I want to say now, just so I don't forget it. It's a lot of question. But what kind of are the differences in your mind between the properties you know and love? Because, like, for instance, you were talking about the themed monopolies. I know that when I open Muppets Monopoly, there's an expectation I have, and I don't even know what it is until I've looked over the board. And I'm ready to say, like, well, Statler and Waldorf aren't here. So like, there are things that like the nerds of that particular thing are looking for.
Mm-hmm.
How do you feel about that in properties that like you have that love of? Because I imagine it makes it easier, but maybe you're so in the weeds you don't know. And then did you come to anything you knew nothing about and had to kind of figure out what fans of that were gonna like? So kind of let's start with the first question, but I want to get the second out so I didn't forget it. So like the experiences of young Andrew and sort of the properties that you liked, how has it felt to be able to touch those properties?
I'm kind of stumbling and speechless because it's kind of indescribable. I feel just like honestly really lucky, and I still kind of, even after doing it for this long, kind of in disbelief that I got to make games around the comic books I read growing up and the movies and the TV show. I was like, is this real? I really got to do this. I got to make a Star Wars game. Like I'm still stumbling at the words. It's a really indescribable feeling, and I just feel so blessed. And yeah, it's also just a humbling experience to say, hey, I got to do this thing, and then other people say, hey, you did a good job. I really like that thing, and we appreciate the thoughtfulness, the work that went into it. We can tell that a fan made it and really thought about those things. So then to kind of answer your second question, what do you do when you're faced with something that maybe you're not as keen on or have as much affinity for? You do a lot of research. You become a fan of it, honestly. The internet is your friend too, to a certain extent. There are a couple of occasions. I'm trying to think back of a couple examples, or either I wasn't as immersed in something, but I knew it, and I had to kind of go back and do my homework, or I just kind of had to, revisit those things. For example, I think a couple of years ago, maybe it came out this year, but I worked on it before I left. Animaniacs was a property that US Monopoly picked up and put out a Monopoly game for. I think it came out. I hope I'm not spoiling something. I'm pretty sure it has.
I'm not sure. Maybe it's coming. They're about to do a new Animaniacs on Hulu right now. So it either has or will soon. If it has, wonderful. If it's about to, you got an exclusive.
I'm pretty sure it's come out. But I watched the show, but I wasn't. It came along a little bit later in my life, so I wasn't as immersed in it. So I was like, all right, well, I have to go back and watch episodes and kind of revisit all the characters and figure out because that board had all the characters and 22 characters. The Animaniacs had a pretty wide cast of characters, but I think unless you're a super fan, you're tell me characters from Animaniacs. You're well, there's Yakko and Wacko and Dot and Pinky and the Brain. And you're and there's a lot more, but you're well, there's the Goodfeathers and there's Buttons and Mindy. And, it's I had to refresh my own memory. Oh yeah, there's that, and there's the Mr. The Mime Guy. And,
oh goodness, I forgot about the Mime Guy.
So, sometimes you just kind of have to go back and do your homework. But sometimes it kind of comes together very easily. So like when I did the Marvel and Star Wars games, I was well, I know all these characters backwards and forwards, so it's very easy to be boom, 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 boom. I won't say it was easy, but it came together. At least the skeleton of it came together pretty quickly. For other ones, I worked on My Hero Academia, and when I knew it was a popular show, but I hadn't watched it. And when we acquired the license, I was all right, well, I guess I better just watch this show. So I just went home and binged the first couple seasons, and it's a pretty good show. I really enjoyed it. So sometimes there's 3 levels to it. Either you just know it the back of your hand, you kind of remember it, but you need a refresher, or something you just kind of have to dive into and immerse yourself in. And I've had to do all 3 of those. But that's kind of the approach. And every once in a while there would be something that would come down the line that would be all right, this is a popular license. Who's a fan of it? Because when you work at a company of 50 people or so, which
Yeah.
is how big US Aptly was when I left, generally you're going to find someone that's a fan of something to at least, have a gut check and be like, does this feel right? Does it resonate? You're a fan of
Yeah.
it. So it's always like, get a fan's opinion of it. If you're not a fan, to make sure like you're not missing anything obvious. And I think for the most part, we always did a pretty good job. But every once in a while, people be like, why'd you put that on Boardwalk and Park Place? This is like the most popular or the most powerful or the, what should be the most expensive property. And you're like, I mean, sometimes people are entitled to their opinions. You're not gonna please everyone.
No, goodness knows. Did you ever think there'd be a day where the Rising game would be on SpongeBob?
No, that was one that was developed after I left. There were definitely conversations about SpongeBob as a property, and I think there's a new movie coming out this year or next year. Like one of the things that we always did at US Aptly was kind of be looking ahead for the next couple calendar years to say, all right, what are the big tentpole movies going to be? What are the new TV shows? Like what's going to be popular that we can be ahead of the curve on? And also like what's having an anniversary or what seems to be like the Animaniacs conversation happened well before they had officially greenlit the series, but there was, some sort of behind the scenes Hollywood talk of, they might be trying to do a reboot. And it was also something that just, was popular and had nostalgia. So it was sort of a calculated risk of like, well, if they don't reboot it, it's still got nostalgia, it'll be popular. If they do, great, then we'll have product that's perfectly timed for it. And fortunately that happens. Sometimes it misses. I think Beetlejuice Monopoly was released earlier this year, and there was talk of a Beetlejuice sequel or reboot or something that hasn't happened yet. So like, sometimes you gamble, sometimes it happens. Hollywood, sometimes they push things out, but they always try and identify things that are at least going to have some pop culture relevance or nostalgia or something like that. There's gonna be an audience for it.
Very cool. And then one last thing I want to ask, only because you are, and we'll probably talk a little bit more as we go through the questions about it, but you're with your work at Pokemon. So like, there's a thing, I don't know what I would guess based kind of generally on your age and mine, because I know I was too old for Pokemon to really resonate. Although when Pokemon Go came out, I suddenly know a lot of the Pokemon because I got really into Pokemon Go. But like, living in that world, also it seems to be that those cards, and you talked about it earlier, they not only function as a game, they also function ostensibly as like trading cards for that game, more so than a Magic the Gathering. Magic the Gathering, the trading card aspect is only there in as much as there's gambling in that game and that you're buying packs to build the thing you need. But it isn't like, or at least I don't think it was back in the day. Certainly, when I did it, you weren't fans of the characters and hoping you could have them to kind of hold a picture of that character. Whereas it seems it's way different for Pokemon, whereas you may really want that Pikachu in a cool hat, and you do not care what the game value is. You just, the same way you would want a Sandy Koufax baseball card or a Bryce Harper baseball card, you want Pikachu in a super sassy hat or, Detective Pikachu. So like, how does all of that work? Like, is all of that thought about in the process, or are you not in the other parts of the process where kind of all those pieces come together?
It's a mix. It's, the game is developed in partnership with Japan, and so
Pikachu.
Yeah, they can kind of dictate some of it, but honestly, like sometimes you can't quite predict. There are some things that are mainstays, like Charizard is just always going to be popular. So you put Charizard in a set, and it doesn't even have to be the most powerful card, but it's going to be one of the most valuable cards just because it's a popular character. So it's interesting that in contrast to Magic, Pokemon functions as like a brand with characters that people find appealing as much as it does a game. So it sort of transcends trading card games that way, and it very much is a trading card. It's a collectible object, but it also is a game. So there will be cards that are valuable because they're good in the game, and there will be cards that are valuable because they're just popular characters. So, you put Pikachu on a card, you put Charizard on a card, you put any number of, a Ditto or a Mr. Mime, or, any number of popular characters on a card, and they're just going to be more popular, more valuable, but they don't necessarily have to be the best cards that go in all the tournament decks. So it's an interesting dynamic for sure. And part of my role there is kind of trying to help balance between those two audiences and say, like, okay, here's popular cards that people are just going to get excited about because they're cool and collectible and they've got a foil treatment or something. And here's cards that are going to be popular just because they're good cards with good stats and good numbers.
Oh, very cool. I imagine that's just got to be so different than the normal way you would face a board game. Because normally it just seems to be you just look at balance, or even, I have no experience in trading card games in any kind of like industry sense. But it seems to be when you're making those, you're like, oh, I kind of have these archetypes I want to work on. I have these neat combos I think could work when people discover them. And that's as far as you go. And there's no balance against like, oh, that picture is going to make it huge. I can actually make that a less valuable card in the game sense than I need to, because there's this kind of unpopular picture that I could make a good game card out of. So let me take the unpopular, like that just seems like a really weird kind of set of calculus to work with. That's got to be kind of an interesting challenge.
It definitely is. And it's also interesting to kind of shift your mindset to a different audience. For me, again, I started working in trading card games, and then with World of Warcraft and other stuff with Upper Deck and Cryptozoic, then moved over into more of the dedicated board game space. And now to go back into the trading card game space, and kind of had to realign my thinking again, because you're marketing to a different audience. The things that you're selling have secondary market value. A board game is a board game. Unless it goes out of print and is something that's highly sought after, it is what it is. It doesn't really fluctuate in price. But trading card games, like collectibles as objects, are very different. So how you package them, how you market them, the audience that you're speaking to is very different. It's adjacent to the board game audience, but you look at trading card games and they're in a different section in the store, right?
Oh, definitely,
they're marketed very differently. And so it's been an interesting experience over the last couple of months to have to make that adjustment. But it's been a lot of fun. And I can't say enough about Pokemon as a company and a brand. It's been a real honor to have an opportunity to work with them. It's, something that's that sort of big, a mega of a brand that's so beloved worldwide it's pretty special.
I could only begin to imagine. And now what I'm going to do is I'm going to jump in. Let's start getting ready for the game, because we've talked for 43 minutes. I just looked up and realized that. We've been here for a hot couple. So if you want to jump in the game, and it's a $10 top prize. If you know how the game works, quick warning to everybody out there. I do this every single time. If you're watching, I don't know what platform you're on. Here's what I do know. There is, quote me if you need to, a hell of a lag. So what that means is once we start the game, stare at your phone. Your phone is the arbiter, the rule maker, the referee. It does everything. That's where your scores are. And the higher your score, the closer you are to our $10 top prize. So once again, we're going to start the game in just a moment. I do all of this talk so you have time to hear it wherever you are, whether you're on Facebook or you're on YouTube or you're on Twitch. You're going to hear this part of the message. We are about to begin. In just a moment, I'm going to put up the count. The count doesn't have a 9. I don't know why. You'll see it. They've never fixed it. I haven't figured out why. It goes from 10 to 8. It does it every week. I'll stop doing that joke as soon as they fix it. But once again, it's a $10 top prize. The faster you answer, the more points it's worth. So get in as fast as you can. If you're here and you play the game every week, we do have a scoring change this week. As the game goes on, the questions are worth more points. I'll explain it to you as we get there. But pretty much if you've watched any game show, you know how this works. We're about to jump in. Let me start the game. Here we go. Yes, I want to start the countdown. 10, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Here is your first question. East Coast or West Coast? We put up the support your local game show. I will tell you the reason we have a $10 top prize is because last week's winner said, let it ride. So that is supporting your local game show. That's the thing you want to do. Feel free at any point to go to coffee.com/Bruce Vogue if you'd like to support the show directly. And that is the one time I will do that. So, Andrew, let's take a quick look. Let's see what the crowd has to say. The crowd says 67-33, East Coast versus West Coast. How do you feel about it and why?
West Coast. West Coast, as I said in the answer, West Coast, best coast. So I grew up on the East Coast. I was born and raised in Atlanta. I mentioned I went to school in University of Miami. Moved out to the West Coast about 12 years ago when I first started working in the game industry at Upper Deck. And I've just stayed on the West Coast. That's where US Monopoly is. That's where Cryptozoic is. I worked remotely for Mondo, and then I moved up here to Seattle for Funko and Pokemon. But I've experienced both coasts, and I've enjoyed my time on the West Coast better than the East Coast. Maybe it's a product of growing up in the South. If I grown up, in the New England area, I might feel differently. But I don't know. I feel like just West Coast, best coast. I like the culture. I like the climate. I like the people. I feel pretty good here.
Very good. Let's take a look at the leaderboard. Leading Steph with 96 points, Josh with 91, Epona with 54. If I mispronounced your name, I am sorry. Chris Pete Dish. Say it again.
I was like, Epona like the horse from Zelda.
Maybe. Actually, maybe.
That's the only Epona I know.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah. Okay. Thank you. And that's why I'm glad we have somebody that professionally works in IP here. So when I don't notice a thing, somebody can come get me. Malika, Yikdid, Chris F, and Anakino, you are all in the game. More questions to go, more time. 9 more questions in the game and a lot more points. Some comments coming in. Let's take a look. I grew up in New York/New England. You wouldn't feel differently. I was going to say, I'm here in the Mid-Atlantic. You wouldn't feel differently. Hashtag bottom fragging. Just a smiley face. And then, yes, like the horse from Zelda, that's my daughter. Okay. Epona, it is. Thank you. Good work. Once again, I'm glad I have a professional IP person here to guide me and keep me on the rails. As we head into our next question, here we go. Cats or dogs? It's simple. We ask some variation of this question almost every week. One thing I note every week is our guest this time, Andrew. Thank you so much for coming on. You get 20 questions ahead of time. You are allowed to pick 10 that you want to talk about. So I would say virtually every week our guest has either cats or dogs or kitties or puppies as a question. It is just if they choose to embrace it or not. The one thing I didn't do for you, Andrew, and I'll let everyone know this, is normally I give you 2 absurdist questions that I steal directly out of the game Super Fight. They've done so poorly lately that I just took a week off. I was like, we have plenty enough things that you've been involved in to talk about that you did not get, like, would a sheep with a laser cannon beat a pirate but with no peg leg? Let's take a look at how the crowd voted. 38-63 dogs over cats. Andrew, how do you feel and why?
Cats. Cats. I'm a cat person. I'm a cat guy. I don't know. I like cats. I like cats a lot.
I have to say, following your social media,
if
you're not prepared for a lot of cat, just get out of the way. Because there will be whole runs of, this is a cat I met on the street.
Yep.
This is a cat I still met on the street. We're now street friends. And then it's just like every day, 2-3 times a day of meeting a new street cat.
Yeah, I have one now, but I have like a sixth sense of always being able to just kind of find cats when out in the wild, and generally they are pretty friendly. So, I like the comment. Wolf, your last name is Wolf. I'm a traitor. It's like, yeah, it's true, but I'm a cat person, not a dog person.
Let's take a look at the board. Epona with 141, Steph with 96, Pete Dish at 94. at 91, Josh at 91, the rest of the board playing. Don't worry, a lot of game left. And unlike previous weeks, the scores do go up this time, so you're not completely out of it until the end. The last question of the game is worth 1,000 points. So you have a lot of room in these early questions. We're moving into our last 100-point question. Here we go. Hike to the top or ride to the top? Hike to the top or ride to the top, whatever that top is for you. Maybe it's Pikes Peak. Maybe it's Splash Mountain. Whatever it is for you. Hike to the top or ride to the top. Interpret it however you want to. Let's take a look. I see a comment coming in. They make me lose, but I like the super fight questions. I mean, I'm still at 0 points, so it does not matter. We've had the last two guests have avoided them like the plague, which was the only reason I decided not to do that to Andrew. But maybe I'll bring them back. Let's take a look and see how the crowd voted. 67-33, hike to the top. Andrew, what's your answer to why?
Hike to the top. So this one was one that I thought about for a long time. Honestly, okay. Well, for as long as you're going to really think about this kind of stuff. But I was like, I like this question, and I think my answer has changed especially as I've moved here to Seattle, where there's just so much good hiking. And like you said, Pikes Peaks, like there's this Mount Rainier, and like I'm not going to climb to the top of Mount Rainier, but there are so many good hikes, and I've really learned to appreciate it. This is going to sound very cliche, but like the journey as much as the destination, because you just get so much gorgeous scenery, and as you ascend, things change. And I've kind of learned to appreciate that journey up to the top as much as the view from the top that I think you miss if you ride to the top. So before moving here, I think I would have said ride, but since I'm in Seattle and I've gotten to enjoy the outdoors a lot more, I've appreciated the hiking element of it.
Very cool. Let's look at the board. Steph leading with 190, Peep Dish 177, at 167. Remember, top prize is $10. No other prizes. Top prize 10. Everybody else, thank you for playing. We're about to move on to the 200-point questions. Here we go. Question number 4. English muffin or bagel? It is our required amount of food questions, of which there are several. We do it every single game. We're not changing it now. It's a formula that works. Let's take a look and see how the crowd felt about this. Wow, 88-13 for the bagel. Andrew, how do you feel and why?
Sorry, one person who said English muffin. You're not stealing all the points. I said bagel.
You weren't able to break any hearts with it. The nooks and crannies were not able to break anyone's hearts this time.
No, an English muffin is good for a couple of things, but I think bagels just have way more function, and they also just can take on way more forms. You can, like, an English muffin is English muffin. You can have sweet bagels. You can have savory bagels.
Yep.
You can have pizza bagels. I've actually baked my own bagels. I've never made
really?
Oh yeah. I mean, I think like a lot of people, maybe some people, during quarantine times, I took on sourdough and started doing a lot more baking, and I've made bagels a couple of times. It's actually remarkably easy, and they're really good. So, and I've never made English muffins, so I can't claim to do that. But yeah, bagels they can be sweet, they can be savory. Also, one of my favorite like sandwiches or just foods is like bagels and lox, cream cheese.
Oh, definitely.
Red onions, capers.
Yep.
You don't get that with an English muffin. So bagels just like, I don't know, it's just superior in all ways, in all forms.
So I'll ask, because we had the East Coast, West Coast question. First, let me just bring up the board so that when I talk about this, people can see answers. Steph leading with 378, with 335, Epona with 315. So, like, how is the lox and bagel situation on the West Coast? Because I always think of that as like an East Coast, New York kind of thing. How is it on the West, or is it just literally no different because food everywhere is just so ubiquitous?
I don't think it's that much different, but
okay.
I have sought out the good bagel places.
Of course.
There are a couple of Jewish delis that like really specialize in making good quality bagels. So, I found some good go-tos. And like I said, I make my own, and I think they're pretty good.
All you need to do is import some decent lox, and you're good.
Well, lox is something we have very plentiful out here because salmon is
Yeah,
very, very readily available in Seattle.
nice.
Yeah, we get really, really good smoked salmon.
Oh, I bet that was one. I've only been to Seattle long enough to do PAX West, and that's just such a whirlwind. You don't really get to like stop and breathe and take in the area much. Like you can try to do it in that way that you do at a convention, where you like run out for 1 hour and try to get to whatever the thing is you think you can get to. But you can't really like sit back and appreciate the location you're in too much.
I remember we had dinner out here a couple of years ago at PAX West. We went to that Indian place. I don't know. Do you
Yep.
remember?
Yeah.
It was with Daryl,
Yeah.
and you guys were talking about the baseball teams and the hats, and
Yep. Wow. Wow, you have a good memory.
I. That was a really fun evening. That was a fun dinner.
Indeed, indeed. For me, so much of the blur, and I don't know, clearly you're not necessarily the same way with conventions, but like I try to retain the convention stuff, but all I kind of remember is this blur of the floor. Like to any show, that's how it is, whether it's the PAXs or Gen Con or even Essen. A lot of Essen, like the time around there, like when you take a trip to an unrelated city to get a layover, that time I have a real good grasp of, and then actual Essen is kind of a weird blur of like booths, and then I left and my memory was normal again. So that's real strange for me.
I think for every show I attend, I probably have like a couple of the key moments that have stood out. So like, that PAX, I remember that dinner. It was just, it was a really fun dinner with a great group of people and fun conversation. I remember distinctly you and Daryl talking about all your different hats and all the different logos for all the minor league teams and like the buttered waffles. And
I can't remember if that was the first one after we did the hat trade or that was the one that sparked the hat trade.
I think it sparked it.
It might have sparked the hat trade because I was trying to remember where that started because so Daryl Andrews, designer of all kinds of stuff. I'll just say Sagrada because that's probably the most popular game he's worked on. I'm guessing it's either that or Titanic because the movie's so big. But he actually, I don't even know if you know this, Andrew, and maybe we talked about it there, but he was in the Major League Baseball fan cave.
Yep, I know that.
For Toronto.
Yeah.
So he had this huge background in baseball, and he was like, "What do you mean you own 100 minor league baseball hats?" And that's how Andrew and I kicked it off. Or I'm sorry, how Daryl and I kicked it off was there. And it might have been there. We were talking about it, and that's how we started with every Gen Con, we switch hats.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
I'm very good friends with Daryl, so yeah, I've heard the stories of the fan cave and everything.
Yeah, which it blew my mind. Him and then Richard Launius designed the logo for the White Sox in the 80s.
I did not know that. I've met Richard. He is an interesting guy.
Say it again?
I've met Richard. He's really a fascinating and fun guy, but I did not know that.
He's a peculiar bird. But he's one of the only single human beings you can pin a major sports logo to. Normally you can pin it to like an artistic collective, but with the Sox in the 80s, you can say, "Oh, it's Richard Launius." So he's been interviewed by ESPN like 15 times because he's like the only living person where it's a single person you can point it to.
Ah, that's so cool. I had no idea.
Yep. And we're going to move everybody on to question number 5, just so you're not sitting here staring at us, talk about other people. Do you eat mac and cheese with a spoon or a fork? So I will say, this one's come up a couple times lately because I did not know that this was so divided. I've since looked up, apparently if you eat it with one implement or the other, you are stunned that the other type of people exist. And I would say that is true with this as well. Let's see how the crowd goes. Crowd goes 63-38 fork and spoon. I'm going to guess this cuts right down the line of which implement they eat it with. So talk to me, Andrew, which one and why?
Fork. And to your point, I was stunned that this is a question. And like, who eats mac and cheese with a spoon? I'm flabbergasted. I cannot conceive of that. I was like, what? Why? Who? It just didn't even... the rationale behind it was like, well, it's just obvious, fork, because why spoon? I mean, I guess if I had to think about it, I'd be like, well, I mean, you needed the fork, the tines to like stab the noodles, but you could scoop up some of the sauce, and maybe people are eating really soupy mac and cheese, but then they're just eating bad mac and cheese.
Yeah.
So it's I would argue this: if you are eating mac and cheese with a spoon, you're eating bad mac and cheese.
Yeah, go back to your mac and cheese and ask it questions.
Exactly.
Make sure you need like. Don't get me wrong. If I have no forks, I'll eat mac and cheese with chopsticks if I need to.
Oh, for sure.
But if given the preference, I don't know who doesn't go with a fork. But I've learned on the internet, because we do research some of these here at the show, that this is a heavily debated thing. And I guarantee you the 3 people that answered spoon cannot believe we feel the way that we do.
Right.
One note, because you can shovel it in your face faster. And I'm going to say, much how Andrew talked earlier, with mac and cheese, it's about the travel. It's not about the destination. It's about the journey to get there with mac and cheese. Spoon wins for Chris. I don't know, Chris. I would argue, much as Andrew said earlier, look into your mac and cheese. Maybe there's a better mac and cheese around you. Maybe we can find one. Apparently, John will be back in a minute. Gonna go flush opponent's phone. Okay. As we move on to our next question, this is our last question at 200 points, and then things just start getting bonkers. Here we go. The Great British Bake Off or The Masked Singer? The Great British Bake Off or The Masked Singer? And you may say, hey, Bruce, you forgot to show the leaderboard. Yes, I did forget to show the leaderboard. You'll see it after this question, after the 200-point round.
Just keep us in suspense.
Exactly. Unintentional, and I didn't realize it until I saw this question start, and gosh darn it, that's how it happens sometimes. These, of course, 2 of the most popular, probably worldwide reality shows, especially that aren't like directly based on like a group of people in a family. Let's take a look and see how people answered. 100% for the Great British Bake Off. Andrew, I feel like we may have given away the game, but what is the answer?
Great British Bake Off.
I mean, it seems so obvious with the things that we've talked about now.
That's true. That's true.
Far more obvious than when I wrote the question.
The order of operations. If we hadn't talked about bagels first, then maybe this would be more of a debate, but that kind of gave it away. But that's okay. People are paying attention.
And it's the faster you answer, the more points it's worth. Let me jump to the board. Steph leading with 732. With 652. Epona with 624. Josh with 565. Malika at 439. Anakano you at 370. Chris F at 286. Peep Dish at 228. Bob in the game with 180. Chris jumping in the game now. Welcome. Still a lot of points available for anybody that's trying to get in. Top prize is 10. Let me take the pen out of my hand that I'm using as a fidgety toy. $10 for those of you that are looking to get in. We're going to jump into question 7 for 300 points. Strategy game or party game? One that we ask a lot of designers on here. Sometimes the answers seem real simple and sometimes they aren't, but it's always interesting, especially someone like you, because you've designed so many different things in so many different spaces. And I would say in a lot of cases, probably you were just sort of handed, like, especially with USAopoly, here is Monopoly, here is a theme, go at it, which may be different than what you would do if given, once again, that blank sheet of paper.
Right.
75-25 for strategy game. What is your answer and why?
My answer is actually party game. The reason why I love strategy games, and obviously I've worked on a number of strategy games, but I think party games just, like, I don't know, they just bring people together in a more approachable way.
Yep.
Like they just transcend gaming in a way that strategy games won't, because you can sit down with a group of people to say, hey, would you like to play a game? And they're like, I don't know, what's it about? And you start describing, Catan or something. And they're like, I don't know, it's complicated. But you're like, you want to play a game? And like, what is it like? And you start explaining,
like illustrations.
Illustrations, or oh my gosh, Time's Up.
Yep.
Is a great party game that I love, or catchphrase or something like that. And like you can explain it in 2 seconds and get people engaged, and they're fun and laughing, and you create memories in a really quick way that, it's like, I've had some great times playing a lot of strategy games and I love them, but I think I have way more strong, lasting, positive memories from the party games that I've played. So, if I had to pick or choose, I'm gonna choose the party game over the strategy game 9 times out of 10. I mean, I think about even times when I've attended game conventions, like especially like the smaller ones like BGG Con or
Oh
Dice
yeah.
Tower, stuff like that. And like especially as the evenings roll on and people are kind of breaking off into groups and playing games, I'm gonna always gravitate towards the group that's playing Times Up or any of the party games than somebody who's sitting down to play something a little bit more crunchy. So yeah, it's where I lean towards, even though I've never really designed like a true party game. I've always worked on either the IP-driven stuff,
Yeah.
the licensed stuff, or stuff that kind of veers more into the strategy side.
Plus, I've always felt like party game design, and I mean, I've reviewed a lot of party games over the year, is so difficult because you don't have a lot of rules to convey an entire experience. And
Mm-hmm.
that's what you need to be able to do in those games. As much as people may say, like, well, it's not a game, it's an activity. You're like, well, I only had 3 rules to make that activity work. I had 3 rules, and you can only hold one thing in each hand, and that's all I was allowed to do. And you have an experience. I've always thought that had to be incredibly difficult to do right.
Did you work on any of the like very simple party games at North Star? Like,
So at North Star, I got
Dude,
to work
right?
on some of the kids' game stuff. But in most cases, like it would be Monster Match. And on Monster Match, it was essentially trying to figure out how to take this game and make a cohesive enough story behind it that you could make stuff that needed to happen work. Like we had that game and it had a scoring system where it just had like a random number on it. And I was like, well, you got to do something to tie that random number in because we don't have a lot of elements to the game. Like it has to all make logical sense. So it was stuff like that I got to work with. Happy Salmon was long since a juggernaut by the time I got there.
Mm-hmm.
So it was just like, Bruce, you love Happy Salmon. We're glad you're a part of the team because you're another person that's enthusiastic about it. But that and Dude, I did work on Dude, which is like the dumbest game ever made. But with that, it was we were handed this deck of Dude cards, and it was now figure out why people would buy it. So that was sort of the riddle I got to answer, was doing stuff like making the weird packaging and that kind of stuff.
Nice.
For that one. But yeah, definitely when you're looking at that, you're like, here's a deck of cards that say the word Dude. Now make it a game people want to play. There are where you're like, oh, I clearly don't get to have a lot of rules here. Because if you're buying a deck of cards that say Dude, you're not really ready for an 11-page rule book.
But that game has been tremendously successful too, to the best of my knowledge.
Yes, that is one we often joke about because the 2 guys who designed it are war game designers, like really crunchy war game designers. They've made like 3 or 4, maybe more games for Academy games.
Okay.
And every time somebody says to me like blah 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 crunchy games, I'm like, yeah, these two, the 2 guys that made it, and I'll pull them up. Like, oh yeah, I've played 1824. I'm like, oh, their most successful game's called Dude. It's a game where you say Dude, and then I just walk away and laugh. Sometimes folks, I'm a jerk. That's how it goes. Let's take a look at the scores real quick while we're talking. Steph leading with 1,005 points at 652. Anakin OU at 637. Ipona next in with 624. So very close, barking at third. But once again, first place is our only prize tonight. We're moving on to question number 8. Question number 8 is a 300-point question. Here we go. Pikachu or Eevee? We talked about it. You're with the team, and I realize in hindsight, looking at it, when I sent this to you, I butchered the spelling of Eevee so bad. Part of it was auto completed to me, and then even I looked at it and I was like, oh, that I fat fingered that part. Even if I hadn't, I was spelling Eevee wrong, which upsets me because I play quite a few of the games and I have way too many Eevees in my collection on Pokemon Go. So this is a thing I should know and simply didn't. Let's take a look and see how the crowd went. This is as close with 9 people as we're going to get to a split. 56-44 for Pikachu. What's your opinion and why?
I actually chose Eevee. I just think that it's just a more interesting character. I mean, yeah, Pikachu is the more popular one, but he has all the evolutions, and they're all so cool.
Yep.
You got your Jolteon, your Flareon, your Vaporeon, your Umbreon, your Sylveon, your Glaceon. I'm probably forgetting one of them. Maybe I got all of them. If I don't remember one, I'll probably lose my job. But like for one Pokemon to evolve into so many different forms that are all really interesting and different, I just think it's a cooler Pokemon, and it's still awfully cute.
Yeah, that's the thing. Like, don't get me wrong, Pikachu's cute, but like Eevee's also real cute. Let's take a look at the scores real quick. Steph with 1,005 still, swinging and missing on that one. Anakano, you jumping up with 912. Epona at 898. Some comments have come in. Let me take care of those real fast. Let's take a look. The Strategy Gamecast, the podcast about strategy games and games you take to strategies. Yeah, that's not the brand I'm going to build myself on. All of this does not say that. And then it took two guys to make Dude. It took, and this is exactly what you were talking about earlier, it took a team of about 7 people to make Dude. Between the 2 designers and then 3 of us helped develop kind of a cohesive look, branding, and thought behind it. We had our in-house graphic designer who kind of like took the ideas that we were yelling and made the first pass of what like the Dude might look like. And then we had to hand that to another graphic designer that just does package layout that did the cards in the game. It takes a team, it takes a cast of thousands to make things like Dude, which is what stunned me from the outside to the inside, because I would have said the same thing looking at Dude in its Sharpie marker aesthetic. It takes a lot of people to get Sharpie marker aesthetic correct.
It does.
Yeah, it's surprising.
But that's where they all start, right?
Indeed. They all start that way, and we thought it would be good to bring it back to that. But yeah, it is definitely, it's very strange once you realize how many people it takes to produce any board game out there. And it's why, and you're going to say, Bruce, you're a terrible person. Why are you doing it? It's why a lot of Kickstarters, especially in the beginning, were mediocre. It wasn't that there weren't great ideas. It's that no one person can do all of it. And back then it was a lot of teams of 1 and 2 doing everything. And you're like, you might be a great designer, but you're not a good developer. You might be a decent graphic designer, but you're not a good portrait artist. You might be decent at packaging, but you're not good at rules writing. Like, there's just so many people involved to make a good game good that it is really surprising. We move on to question number 9. Question number 9 is worth 500 points. You can get in the game now with the Avengers or the X-Men. We didn't go DC Marvel this time. I figured we're talking to someone that's worked on Marvel. I'm going all Marvel all the way for this one. 1 second remaining on the board there. Let's take a look. I'm curious to see what people thought.
Me too.
89-11 for the Avengers. Andrew, what's the answer and why?
It's actually X-Men.
I knew we were going to break some hearts with this one.
Even though I worked on an Avengers themed game, I grew up with the X-Men and mutants as my sort of favorite comic book go-tos. I wasn't into the Avengers as much as a kid, so I think from a nostalgia perspective, that's always where my heart has lied. I mean, with the movies, the Avengers are great, but it's not it for me. It's the comic books and where it all started, and I was always a huge fan of all the X titles and the mutants. And honestly, I think that like to get a tiny bit more serious here, like the stories about mutantum and like the parallels to a lot of things in our culture and our society, I think are really, really resonant. Like there's some really good storytelling there.
Definitely.
There's good storylines and stuff with the Avengers as well, but especially with the civil rights movement and all that stuff, sort of the X-Men was portraying in still an entertainment medium. Mm-hmm. I think really it's still really resonant to this day. So yeah, my heart's with the mutants.
Well, plus, and like you're going to be of the right kind of group of nerd to talk about this, but like before the movies, I didn't know anyone that really cared about the Avengers. I knew
Right.
people that knew the Avengers, and they're like, oh yeah, it's the same way you look at almost like the Justice League, where you're like, oh, it's the all-star team. It's the greatest heroes they have. And with that, it's always going to be like kind of cool.
Mm-hmm.
But I never remember anyone growing up that was like, oh my goodness, I find myself so emotionally connected to the Avengers. There might be
Right.
like an Avenger where they're like, oh no, I'm really a Captain America guy, and I believe in truth and
Mm-hmm.
the spirit of justice in the American way, or I believe that technology is important and the things that Tony Stark has gone through addiction are important. But no one was like, but I need the Avengers. That
Yeah.
is, I think, wholly a product of how good a job Disney did bringing that all together for the movies.
Oh, for sure. Well, and then to be fair, a lot of the X-Men movies didn't really help that much.
No,
There are
no
some
goodness,
decent
no.
ones. They're not all terrible, but yeah, I'm glad to know that Fox has been acquired by Disney, and like all that stuff will be in the MCU pantheon at some point
Yep.
to allow the creative talent that Kevin Feige and the team at the MCU has kind of developed to take a whole new crack at that, and see how it all gets integrated.
Yep.
It's going to be exciting, and I'm not really. I think we're going to have to wait a little while
Oh
because
yeah.
they work so far ahead. But
Mm-hmm.
at some point, we're going to see an MCU official version of mutants, and I don't know when it's going to happen, but I hope at some point, I don't know, in my lifetime at least, we're gonna get an Avengers versus X-Men.
Oh, if only.
I think it'll happen at some point.
I feel like it has to, but then you have to take a look at like what's happening with movie theaters and movies and all that kind of stuff. All that dark stuff we're not
Yeah.
going to worry about right now.
No.
Let's take some comments in. Oh no, I misclicked. My heart belongs to the X-Men on Fox. Also, Gambit had a bow staff. I'm a Gambit guy. Every video game where they let you play the entire universe, I'm always taking Gambit, good or not, because I want to hear the sexy Cajun accent, and I want to throw cards. All I want to do is just go like Royal Flush, yeah, and throw cards, and that's all I want to. I don't even care if I win.
I think that's another thing about X-Men over Avengers. It's like the characters are just they had the agency to be like more weird because the mutants could be all kind of things.
Yep.
The Avengers characters, it's like Captain America and Iron Man, like they were more, I don't know, normal. Mutants, you got all kind of weird stuff that it was just like there was more kind of creative liberty when they approached mutantdom. So it was, I don't know, there was more fun to it, I think.
I don't disagree, but it very much felt like the Avengers were there to be the counterpart to the Justice League of America. We need our dream team. Make sure we have our dream team together. And I certainly see, and I see why, beyond even the licensing deals, why Marvel would look that way for things. My favorite was Peter David's X Factor strong guy for the win.
Yeah.
Bob on the other side. I want to get all, let me explain to you about the Avengers, but nobody needs that. And you're right. I feel that you probably are right about that. One more thing. Let's take a look. Disney has recently listed the old Fox Sony X-Men movies as, quote, legacy. Hopefully that means we'll see some new stories. I'm sure we will. Stop making me want to go all Avengers nerd. Help me help you. Well, then fair enough. We're going to move on to our final question of the game. It is worth 1,000 points at the end of this. We will determine the game. If you have 5 points left, so other than Chris, you are officially out no matter what happens. But Steph is vulnerable. Here is your final question of the game for the $10. Here we go. Instrumental or a cappella? I figured this was the most absurd question I had asked you of the questions that we had in today's game. Was instrumental or a cappella? In hindsight, I think you would have done well with the absurdist questions. But that's me getting worried. I got worried about what had worked in the past. Let's take a look at how everybody feels about this. As split down the middle as we can get, 44-56 on instrumental. Andrew, how do you feel and why?
I chose instrumental. I just like for music for me, I kind of like it in the background. I like the ambiance of it. The lyrics, the like words that are sung never really connected to me as much.
Okay.
So, and I think a lot of it comes from like also like watching a lot of TV and movies and that kind of stuff. The soundtracks just resonated more. So I just prefer instrumental to voice stuff.
Very cool. We're going to go to the board in just a minute and check the final scores and figure out who our winner is. First, I just want to get you on the screen. Andrew, thank you so much for taking the time to be a part of this tonight. I really appreciate you being willing to give me 90 minutes of your time for my silly little game show.
It was my pleasure. I had a lot of fun. I've talked to people all week. It's like, oh, I'm going to do this game show thing. It's really fun. You should check it out. And it's like, it's just a good way, especially in the sort of now times, to be able to connect with people, and I think it's really important. So I'm pleased to have the opportunity, and it's been really fun just hanging out.
Indeed. Like, it's been God forever, because I did. Wow. Because I think you and I are like bump into a convention kind of for a second, and then talk significantly more on like social media kind of people.
Yeah, and I know, and I think amongst the industry and a lot of us, there are a lot of like, we're con friends. You make the rounds, you say hi to people, and then you don't have the opportunity to connect as much. So again, like talked about when we had that dinner at PAX a couple of years ago, and it was really it's really great. It's like I am always eager to have these opportunities to connect with people, and especially now when we don't get to travel to shows and see each other as much, I think that these kind of things are even more important. So thank you for doing this, and thank you for having me on.
Nope. Thank you so much for being a part of it. Couple things we're going to note before we reveal our final score to you. As noted, if you are the winner of the game, contact me at BG The Game Show on Twitter, and I will Venmo or PayPal you your $10 grand prize. John saying thank you, Bruce Andrew. Thank you, John, for taking the time to be out here and be a part of it. Chris noting we all have a con family. And Chris, if we get to see each other again, I'll take you somewhere for good macaroni and cheese so that you understand what that's like. I'll go out of my way in whatever city we're in to find a way to do that. Now let's reveal the scores at the end of the game. Here we go. 1,000 points on the line. What happened? It did that. It should not have done that. It should have shown me scores. Here we go. With 1,787 points at the end of the game. Epona winning the game. Contact me. You'll get your $10. Anakin OU, your daughter beat you. 1,695. Josh in third with 1,391. 1,376. Steph leading all the way to the end. On the final question, 1,005. Malik at 688. Pete Dish at 682. Bob W at 429. Chris F at 286. And other Chris probably left long ago. Once again, folks, thanks so much for coming out, for being a part of this. Epona, make sure you contact me. We'll get that money out to you. Andrew, once again, thank you so much for being a part of all of this. Just to let everybody know, here is kind of the way the rest of the week goes. Tomorrow, there will not be content. And on Saturday, the new Jackboxes come out, so check out our Twitch channel for the Party Gamecast, Twitch TV/The Party Gamecast. We're going to be playing from 8 to midnight over there to check out the new Jackbox and play all the Jackboxes. We would love to see you there. We'll be here next week. Don't worry. In the 9 p.m. slot, we are going to see you. One more time, Andrew, thank you so much for coming out tonight. And everybody, between now and the next time you come here, try to play something. Have a great night, everybody. Stay safe, stay clean, stay sane. Do the best.